One Olden Light. My mom had a seizure in her sleep. She was an epileptic. During the attack, she wrapped herself in her blankets and passed out from lack of breathing. Paramedics managed to resuscitate her and take her to the hospital. It was early in the morning, around 4:30 AM. Mai was instructed to call all the relatives to inform them that my mother was in the hospital. The first and most important call was to Grandma, her mom. However, before I picked up the phone and dialed her number, a call rang. It was Grandma who called. It was already 5:30 AM, according to her time zone. It was 2:30 AM. She wanted to tell us that she saw my mom bathed in golden light. She claimed to have talked to her mom, but now she's dead and heading to a better place. At that moment, I didn't know that Mom was going to die. Her father was with her in the hospital and also did not know that she was going to die. Even the doctors didn't know yet that her brain had already died, but somehow Grandma found out about it and contacted me. Incredibly creepy. 2. The woman in the window. My friends and I went for a walk to the cemetery a couple of blocks from home on Halloween. As they say, because why not? We are not afraid of all these creepy stories. There's a building nearby where new restaurants are constantly opening and closing. None of them stay for long. In fact, the cemetery is the backyard of that building. That night, for some reason, the lights were on in the building, and a woman in a pink dress was standing in the window and just looking at us. But we all knew that the building was empty, that no one had yet managed to rent a room there. My friends and I were very tense. We walked along the building, keeping an eye on that woman, and every second we realized more and more clearly that something was wrong here. This woman was following us, from window to window, but it was as if she was sliding, not walking. We were really scared and already ran from there as fast as we could. However, when we ran to the end of the building, we were horrified to see that she was standing there, outside. There are no windows in the end at all. She just stood there, watching us run on. Since that night, we have never walked through cemeteries in our lives. 3. Small world. Back when I was a student, I was walking home with my sisters from a sorority meeting. We didn't live on campus, but were about 20 minutes away from it. It was about 2:00 AM, and at first, we were alone on the streets. No cars, no pedestrians, no one. But then we noticed a man walking towards us. He was a tall, elderly white man on crutches, and with a black dog next to him. We parted to let him pass on the sidewalk, and then we greeted him, but he didn't pay any attention to us. However, his dog looked at us in fright and quickly snuggled up to his master. A few blocks later, we heard the distinct clatter of crutches again. We came to the intersection, and around the bend we saw the man again. We parted again, joking about how small the world was and asking if he was lost. However, he continued on his way again in silence. At the same time, his dog looked at us with the same frightened look and clung to him in the same way. So we almost reached the house and heard the clatter of those crutches again. Only this time, we didn't understand where exactly it was coming from. We turned onto our street, and halfway to our house we finally saw that man with crutches. He came out of the house, our house, and just walked past us. His dog ran over us with his frightened eyes again and ran closer to the man. Only this time the dog was yellow. To this day, I can't understand how a man on crutches could catch up with us so many times. How did he know where we live? And what happened to the dog that changed color? What kind of creepy stories and harassment are these? 4. Warning! When I was in college, I often went home to my hometown on weekends, 145 away. One day, on another weekend, my friend decided to go with me, but she was going to go in her car. I had a very vivid dream on Saturday night. In it, a little girl came up to me and said, "Please, take care of my sister." And she showed me a picture of a car accident on the highway. There were 2 cars there, a silver Corolla, my friend's car, and a black Ford Explorer. The next morning, I immediately called her, told her about the dream, and asked if she had a sister. That's why I only saw her brothers. Her answer stunned me. Well, my mother once had a stillborn baby girl. I asked her how old she would be today, to which she replied, 5. I immediately associated this age with the girl in the dream and became even more worried. I assumed it was her sister and persuaded my friend to ride in my car. The next night, sitting at home in my hometown, I accidentally turned on the news, which showed a car accident. The same stretch of highway, but this time there was only that Ford. To be honest, it scares me to this day. 5. Footprint. I would like to start by saying that a lot of things have happened in this house, but I'll share the most frightening part. Background. The area where my house is located was once an open prairie. We were constantly finding Native American artifacts scattered around the neighborhood. When my parents divorced, I was still a teenager, my mom and I moved into this house. At first, everything seemed great. There was a lot of space and the house was very cozy. However, over time, strange things began to happen in the house. The more I noticed them, the more frequent they became. For example, I heard someone coming down the stairs while brushing their teeth. Of course, I assumed it was my mom, but whenever I checked, there was no one there. Soon, footsteps became commonplace, especially at night. After a while, it finally dawned on me what the reason was. The reason is that this house was haunted. That's when everything got really creepy. One day, my friend and I returned from a walk to my house. Mom was on a business trip at the time, so we decided it would be really cool to hang out in an empty house together. We could get something to drink or do whatever we want. We were wrong. After entering the house, we immediately went to the basement. It was cooler there than in the rest of the house. As I walked down the stairs, I noticed that the yellow Beatles submarine poster hanging at the bottom of the stairs was slightly tilted to the left. I thought I must have hit him or something. Passing by, I adjusted it and we went further into the room. It is worth noting that posters and photographs were hung all over the walls in the basement. I fixed it and we went into the main room. And that's where we got really scared. All the photos and posters in the room were tilted slightly to the left, just like that poster by the stairs. But the oddities didn't end there. The door to the storage room was ajar. And a storage room is essentially a room where there was earth instead of a floor. I went to the door and froze. There was some kind of golden glow coming from there. There was a light switch about 3 meters from the door. I pulled myself together, jumped into the pantry and turned off the light. In search of a rational explanation, I called my mom. But she said that she didn't know what was the matter, and that she hadn't gone down to the basement for several weeks before leaving. A shiver ran down my spine. I looked around the storage room and noticed a footprint in the dirt. It was the most twisted footprint imaginable. I froze in fear. My friend too. We looked at each other in silence, feeling a sickening, gut-wrenching feeling. I slammed the pantry door and locked it, and then we rushed out of the house as fast as we could. I'll never forget how disgusting and ugly that footprint looked, and the thought that I even decided to go in there and turn off the light knocks the ground out from under my feet. 6. The ritual. After my grandmother's death, according to tradition, my family performed this ritual. In fact, a sanctuary is being created for the deceased. For the first 7 days after death, at 7 p.m., we were silent for an hour. So we let the spirit come back and say goodbye. On the last day of the ritual, the glass vase that stood directly above the shrine fell and broke as we sat silently in the next room. We were already a little on edge back then, and now this. The vase had been there quietly for many years, and even the windows were all closed. After a quiet hour, we called my aunt, who also spent that hour in silence at home. The first thing my aunt started telling me was that something strange had happened. She and her whole family were gathered on the second floor when one of the doors on the ground floor slammed shut. They checked all the doors. The house was locked. The windows were also locked. They couldn't understand what had happened, but what was even more frightening was that all the doors in the house were open. My aunt had been living in that house for over 10 years and had never encountered anything like this. I'm not saying anything supernatural happened that night, but these creepy stories definitely make my whole body shudder. 7. The knife. Ugh. It's not a story about ghosts, haunted houses, or anything else. It's about living in a place for 10 years and feeling how that place is turning against you. Places have their own feelings. The country around you has its own feeling, which you get used to. I used to live on an old southern plantation that turned into a horse farm. Over 1,000 acres of forests or pastures. One day, I was exploring with my dogs, one of the equestrian trails in the forest, 20 minutes away from home, and decided to accidentally leave the trail. I went anywhere. Turn 90 degrees, go down into the spring, then climb up under the ancient barbed wire fence and wander for a while. So I walked around until I found 2 large limestone caves directly opposite each other. Both entrances were blocked by a pile of rocks piled haphazardly on top of each other. But the entrances were completely blocked. To be honest, that's the only reason I wanted to go inside, but common sense dictated that it was better not to do this. After all, I didn't even have a phone, and no one knew exactly where I was. What if Manya gets bitten by a snake, or I break my leg on the rocks? So I took a quick look around the caves and found that damn old knife. An amazing knife. It looked like someone had carved it out of a deer's horn. As soon as I picked up the knife, the forest seemed to change. If you've ever lived outside the city, in the same place for a long time, you'll understand me. My dogs came closer and snuggled up to me. I felt like an unwelcome guest. When I put down the knife, I hoped that everything would go away. But this terrible feeling didn't go away until I was completely out of the woods and almost back home. After that, I never felt comfortable being alone in those woods. One moment I'm happy and exploring the world, and the next, someone is watching me. Someone who hates me very much. I'm sure it can be explained by nerves or something else, but... Later, I searched for caves, but I never found them, and this was despite the fact that he knew exactly where he had left his footprints. I know this feeling of connection with the earth. I used to be able to wake up, go outside, and immediately know if something was wrong. Whether a horse is sick or stressed, people hunt on our land or not. I can't explain it. I just feel it, that's all. Whatever I felt when I picked up that knife, it was very, very hostile. It was probably my most inexplicable experience. 8. The basement. The story of how I lived at my brother's house. 2 months after my brother and his wife bought a new house. The leather of rims meet, and then also to work. So, I got the keys to the house and the instructions, and I lived in their house for only 3 nights. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. 3 creepy stories. Monday evening passed without incident, but only until midnight. Lying on the couch in the living room, I was watching Conan, their cat, and there was a cat lying on my chest. I was already beginning to fall asleep. The next thing I knew, I was standing in total darkness. I was completely distraught. I had no idea where I was. I felt around in the dark and didn't feel anything. Finally, I realized that there was actually a faint blue light coming from above. I moved towards him and only then realized where I was. I was in the fucking basement. The light came through the basement door at the top of the stairs that lead to the kitchen. Apparently, enough moonlight was coming in through a window in another part of the kitchen. I ran up the stairs, turned on the kitchen light, and closed the basement door. I was terrified until I calmed down enough to come to the conclusion that you probably have already come to. I went down the stairs myself in my sleep, and even opened the door to the basement, which, I know, was locked. A couple more things are important for the story. First, the basement. The house was very nice. In fact, more than they could afford. The only exception was the basement. I've only seen the basement once, when I was on a guided tour for the first time. It wasn't repaired at all. He was the only important thing they wanted to fix. All they had there were a few boxes and a washing machine with a dryer. I had no reason to want to go down there, and I kind of forgot about its existence. Another point is that sleepwalking is the norm for my family. My brother was constantly talking in his sleep, and sometimes he walked, and it always scared the hell out of me. The idea of people doing something in their sleep just scares me to the core. It still scares me. My brother knew about it and often teased me about it, so it was known in my family that I had this phobia. But, as far as I know, I had never, ever walked in my sleep before that night. The image of me sleeping, getting up from the couch, going to the kitchen, opening the door to the basement, and shuffling down the stairs in total darkness replayed over and over in my head. It's creepy as hell. Anyway, I saw that the TV in the living room was still on, and there was a wedding commotion going on. I watched the rest of the movie, trying to laugh and think of sleepwalking as a funny story that I would tell my brother. Then I went upstairs to the guest room and fell asleep. It was the first night. The next morning, in the light of day, it didn't seem so scary. I wrote to my brother about it and joked, It didn't bother me at all day, but when I left the office and went to the car, I was overcome with a feeling of fear. Suddenly, the thought of going to sleep in that house and maybe sleepwalking again scared me. So I came up with a plan. I stopped at a hardware store and picked up one of those rubber wedges for doorways. At my brother's house, I stuck it in the crack under the basement door and kicked it until it went as far as it could. Then, I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. Perfect. By nightfall, I went upstairs and fell asleep. And when I woke up, I swear to God, it seemed to me that I was dreaming. I was standing in the dark again, but this time I knew exactly where I was. The smell is the same. The concrete floor under my feet is the same. I looked around for the light from above, but at first I couldn't find it because it was further away. I was right next to the stairs last night. This time it was 5 meters to the stairs. I jumped up the stairs and turned on the kitchen light. I saw a rubber wedge right on the floor, a meter away from me, as if it had been thrown there. I tried to imagine myself as a sleepwalker again. From the bedroom down the stairs, I'm trying to open the door to the basement. I bend down and pull out the wedge, and then I slowly descend into the darkness again. I decided to turn on the light in the basement and leave it on. I opened the door and flipped the switch on the stairs to the basement. But I saw that the main switch was at the bottom of the stairs. To make you understand the layout, the staircase divides the basement into 2 parts. There is a small area with a washing machine and dryer on the right, and a large outdoor area on the left. Anyway, I went down and turned on the lights all over the basement. It was then that I noticed something that I hadn't noticed on that first tour. About 5 meters away, on a large landing, there was a door to a small closet. This door was closed, but had no door handle, just an empty hole. It seemed like it would swing open freely. I realized that I had just woken up right next to that door. Then a damn strange thought occurred to me. Every night I went to the door, and each time I walked a little further before I woke up. As soon as this thought occurred to me, I went up the stairs again, left the light on, and closed the door. I went up to the bedroom, but it took me forever to fall asleep. It was the second night. The next morning, Wednesday, I woke up late for work. I didn't think about the basement at all because I was in a hurry to get ready. However, at work, I was still curious about what was behind the door. So I wrote to my brother and asked. He replied, "Wait, why were you in the basement?" I realized that when I wrote to him the day before, I still hadn't told him exactly where I woke up. After a bit of thought, I finally decided and wrote about it, and he clarified that he actually woke up in the basement for 2 days in a row. After a while, he sends a novel-length message about how creepy it is in the basement, not going down there, and so on. How they tried to put trash bins in the basement, and the cats made a mess of the house because they refused to come down. How he volunteers for any job other than laundry so long as he doesn't have to go down there. He wrote all this, and I read it and couldn't believe it. Because my brother has never believed in the paranormal or superstition since we were kids. I also realized that he still hadn't answered my question, but I already had no time. After work, I experienced the same feeling of fear on the way to the car. I really didn't want to stay there again, and I decided that I didn't need it all. I'll come, feed the cats, pick up my things, and come straight home. I'll just stop by again in the morning to feed them, and goodbye. Going to bed in my apartment, I thought about all the steps I would have to take to go down to the basement again in my sleep. Find your car parked a block away, drive to your brother's house in a dream, and so on. But this time I slept the whole night away. It was the third night. On Thursday morning, I stopped by the house as planned. I was about to leave when I remembered that the light was still on in the basement. Without hesitation, I went downstairs to turn it off. There was something about being there in the morning. The basement seemed like a wonderful place that morning. When I went downstairs, that door caught my eye again. She didn't seem scary anymore, so why not examine her? I went to the closet and I distinctly remembered that I didn't feel any fear at all. Until I reached for the door handle hole to open it. As soon as I did that, I felt this electric sensation. Instantly, like the air before a storm. I imagined a hand going through that hole and grabbing my arm. It was like stepping on the gas pedal from 0 to 60 km/h, going from a lack of fear to the certainty that something terrible would happen if I opened that door. It's hard to describe it any other way than this electric feeling. I took the rest of my things upstairs and left the house. A month later, I met my brother at happy hour. After drinking a couple of glasses, we started joking about me, sleepwalking in the creepy basement. I reminded him that he had never answered me about what was behind the door, and he said I didn't want to know. At first, he was joking, but then he began to insist. Finally, he told me, and I didn't believe him. He's the older brother who's been bullshitting me a million times in my life. According to him, the previous and first owners of the house had a teenage daughter who equipped a basement for her bedroom. The door led to her closet, where one night she curled up, took a few pills, and committed suicide. The family was going to rebuild the basement, but after they took it apart, they realized they couldn't do it. They had to move. That's why only the basement was unfinished. And that's why my brother could afford this huge house. The seller had to inform that a suicide had occurred in the residence. He said if I didn't believe him, look up the market value of identical houses in his tract. I know how much they paid for their house, and it turned out to be much cheaper. He and his wife considered themselves adequate people and did not turn down an incredibly lucrative deal, only they decided not to tell anyone about the history of the house. After they moved in, his wife liked the basement, but my brother hated this basement. He apologized for not telling me anything before I stayed there, but he didn't even think that I would have any reason to go downstairs. Now that's what convinced me. I said, okay, the only thing that makes me believe you is that the last morning I was there, I went to the closet door. And at that moment, I saw my brother's face change. However, I decided to finish. When I went to open it, the air was like... And at the same moment, I said, electricity. And my brother said, electricity. We said it at the same time, and I saw his face and realized that he was telling the truth. I never set foot in that basement again, and I haven't walked in my sleep since.